Hey guys, Spudknocker here, as always, and today we're going to take a look at one of the new features that shipped with the 2.5.6 update for DCS World, and I know a lot of guys have been having quite a few troubles with the 2.5.6 update. It's broken a few things like multiplayer and objects popping up at the wrong distance, things like that, but we did get a couple really positive things with this new update, and of course we are offline in an open beta, so things are going to go wrong, but hopefully Eagle Dynamics will get us some new updates up here shortly, and fix the issues that this new update caused. But I figured we'd stick to the positive today and take a look at one of the awesome new features that did ship with the 2.5.6 update, and that is of course the cheek mounting station for the Lightning Pod for the F-18C Hornet. Now, a few other things that did come with the update were some lighting improvements for night flying, which I think look really nice and really help the immersion for flying at night and aid in your being able to see at least somewhat of a distance at night, as well as making those colors a bit brighter. As well as, of course, the radar-directed gunsight for the F-16C Viper. So this cheek mounting station for the Lightning Pod on the F-18C has been a super hotly anticipated update for the F-18, and for good reason. It will certainly give pilots within DCS World a lot more flexibility when it comes to choosing their loadouts, as well as increasing the amount of weapons they carry on their aircraft, and increasing their flexibility in combat. But, of course, there are a few things that we want to keep in mind when we're flying with the Lightning Pod mounted on a cheek station, and there is a very good reason why I'm flying a Canadian CF-188 here. The United States military, specifically United States Marines, do not use the cheek mounting station for their Lightning Pods on their Hornets. Now, there is a reason for this. Most F-18s that fly with the Marines, specifically their D models, the two-seaters, fly in the FAC-A or Forward Air Controller Airborne role. And as a result of that, they want to have as much of an unobstructed view from their pod as possible. When we have the pod here on the cheek station, as we can see, we can potentially mask the pod with the centerline drop tank. And so that's something we have to be aware of when we fly with the Lightning Pod on that centerline, or on the cheek mounted station, as a result. When we come off from a target, we always have to peel off the target to the right hand side, because when we roll wings level, we don't want to have that pod masked. If we peeled off to the left hand side and we're trying to laze a bomb into its target and we roll wings level again, we potentially could mask that target or that point we're looking at with the centerline drop tank, or potentially a large weapon hanging off that centerline station, such as like a GBU-10 or whatever you want to put there. So there also is the fact that when we're flying with a double ugly loadout, such as what we have on our current CF-188 that we're flying, we need to make sure that we're always factoring in how to balance out our aircraft. We always want to make sure we don't have too much torque forces on our longitudinal axis of our Hornet, as that will make it much more difficult to control and decrease our performance, which of course can affect you in combat when you're either trying to kill something or make sure that you don't get killed by something, of course. Now, I have a full video on flying with a double ugly loadout that includes how to trim the aircraft out using the FCS page on your DDIs, as well as, of course, taking off, landing, and just flying. When you're flying with a double ugly loadout and having those torque forces on that longitudinal axis, you're really going to have to be trimming out the aircraft constantly as you change airspeeds, as you change angles of attack, as you change the weight of the aircraft by either dropping weapons or using up fuel in those external fuel tanks. Things like that that can really come into play and drastically affect the performance of your Hornet, whether you're flying a CF-188, a EF-18A, or a F-18C belonging to the Marine Corps. So, we've got a couple really cool and interesting weapons, and as I said before, we can really increase your flexibility in terms of weapon carriage when you're carrying a targeting pod on that cheek station. So we've got an AGM-65E on the right-hand side of the jet. We've got a GBU-16 as well as a GBU-38 on the left-hand side of the jet. Now, the reason we chose these weapons and put them in their specific places is actually dependent upon making sure our aircraft is nice and balanced out. We have that GBU-16 opposite of that external fuel tank on the inboard station on our right-hand side, for the reason that that external fuel tank weighs a little over 1,000 pounds, so it's nice to have a 1,000-pound class weapon on the other side to help balance things out. Now, of course, we always want to have our lighter weapons further out on our wings. So the AGM-65E, the LMAV that we have on our outboard right-hand station, is roughly about 750 pounds, if I'm remembering correctly, about the weights of Mavericks. And thus, we want to have something that is approximately the same weight on the other side. So we put our GBU-38 out there on the left-hand outboard station. Now, when it comes to this, we also want to make sure that we have a good plan when it comes to releasing our weapons in the correct order to make sure that we maximize the performance of our jet and reduce the torque force on that longitudinal axis as much as possible. So what we want to do is you want to release your outboard weapons first if possible. So for this mission, I'm going to go ahead and release my GBU-38 first. Then I'm going to go ahead and fire my LMAV, and then finally drop my GBU-16. Now keep in mind here that if you've got a JTAC on the ground and he's screaming for air support and he needs a specific kind of weapon right now, give it to him. And so therefore you're going to have to just trim out and just kind of live with the results of that. But if you have any kind of a control over what weapons you release in what order, definitely go for the outboard and work inboard. So that way you can reduce those torque forces as much as possible. So we'll go ahead and hop into the cockpit and get started with this little demonstration of flying with that cheek-mounted Lightning Pod, which, as I said before, is very, very cool, very awesome addition, and will give our foreign Hornet operators, such as in the Spanish Air Force, the Royal Australian Air Force, and the Royal Canadian Air Force, a lot of fun in representing their home jets. So let's go ahead and hop in the office. Alrighty, we're about 22 miles out from our IP point, so let's go ahead and start setting up our jet for combat. We've already got our master arm turned on because this was of course a hot start. We'll go ahead and flip over to air to ground mode. We'll turn on our laser designator and arm our laser. First we'll go ahead and pull up our FLIR, and we'll change our laser code to, let's say, 1755. Now, of course, the default laser code for DCS World is 1688, but that doesn't really matter so much. You can change it to whatever you want, and of course, if you're flying in multiplayer with wingmen, you're going to want to make sure you have your own discrete laser code, or your weapon, whether it's an LMAV or a LGB, might fly off and hit someone else's laser beam, which of course you don't want to have happen, as that can lead to fratricide or any other kind of bad situations. Alright, so we'll go ahead and pop into our Mark 83. Laser guided Mark 83, which is our GBU-16. We'll make sure the mechanical fuse is off, our E fuse is instant, and we'll put in the code 1755. Perfect. Mode auto. Make sure we got that good to go. So we should be good to go there, and then for our Maverick we'll do the same. 1755. Just make sure we've got everything set up to stay ahead of the jet as much as possible before we get into combat. And lastly, we'll go over to our GBU-38 and get that INS system in that bomb aligned. So we'll make sure we go to target of opportunity mode, since we're going to use it in conjunction with our targeting pod. We'll set the electrical fuse to instantaneous, and we'll pop on over to the JDAM display. We'll go ahead and kill the autopilot here. And as you guys can see, I'm already having to retrim out the jet, which is not a problem at all. Make sure that we have our diamond on the right-hand side so that we have TDC control over our lightning targeting pod. Pop over to our SA page here, and we'll push up our waypoint to our target point. Abu Musa Island is serving as our IP point, and then we've got Greater Tomb Island out here serving as our target point, with some different vehicles dotted around the island that we can drop some weapons on for this little demonstration. So we'll come off to the right here. Looks like our weapon is counting down just fine, so we got that going for us, which is nice. We'll just go ahead and pop it back into automatic throttle control, and we'll go ahead and pop the barometric altitude on. If you can, you want to reduce your pilot workload as much as possible, especially when you're doing things like looking for targets. And looks like we got a good view on the island here. Now, I really dislike CCD mode in the F-18's Lightning system. The green scale DDIs just make it very difficult to see anything. And, of course, Black Hot is even more difficult to see anything, in my opinion. So I always like to keep it on White Hot. So there should be a nice silkworm battery around here somewhere. There it is. Why don't we go ahead and zoom on in to this silkworm radar right here. And we'll go ahead and pop on over to, looks like our weapon is aligned and good to go, so we'll go over to pop on over to mission here. We'll hit TDC depress, and we now have a mission set up for the target of opportunity mode for our GPU 38 on our left wing over here. Now, I really like dropping JDAMs in conjunction with the targeting pod, because it's kind of like dropping a laser guided bomb, but it's completely fire and forget, so you can just completely forget about that bomb once you hit the pickle switch, and eventually it'll hit its target. Now keep in mind here that there is no time to impact that shows up on the HUD or anywhere on our targeting pod when you do release that LGB. So keep that in mind, and it doesn't mean that that weapon has gone dumb. You just may have to wait a little bit longer, or it may take a little bit longer for that weapon to hit. Alright, we'll take her out of auto throttle control, and we'll push up the throttle a little bit, always making sure that we're nice and fast in the target area, keeping that kinetic energy going. We are almost in range. We are currently in range. We'll give it a little bit more. And pickle. Now we'll kick off the labels, because those are a little annoying. Alright, we're retrimming out the jet here. And we're going to peel off, we're going to kick off the autopilot, and we're going to peel off to the right-hand side here. Now, why are we peeling off to the right-hand side after hitting that target? Well, let's go ahead and re-go over this. We've got the targeting pod sitting about right here on our left-hand cheek station. So therefore, if we peel off to the right-hand side, coming off the target, we're not going to get in danger of, when we roll wings level, of potentially masking our field of view of our targeting pod with that big old fat centerline fuel tank that we have on the jet with our double ugly loadout here. So that's mostly why we do that. You can peel off to the left, you just have to be very careful and pay attention to your masking dot to make sure that you don't accidentally mask your pod, which could be kind of a bummer, because if you lined up your target, you're ready for a good roll-in, and then you mask your pod and the laser gets blocked, even for just a split second, your bomb will go stupid and it won't hit anything. Of course, this doesn't apply to JDAMs, but it certainly applies to laser-guided bombs. So let's see if we can see this guy hit our target. Also, it's nice because with the pod completely unmasked, looking off to the left-hand side, we will be able to see... There it goes. We'll be able to see target area completely, or Greater Tomb Island here, and be able to completely and totally find our next target and be ready to engage it, no problem. And looks like that bomb is certainly going to hit. The other day I actually accidentally released a JDAM outside of its normal range, and it completely and totally whiffed. As to be expected, I suppose. And shack. One silkworm battery totally dead, and one civilian vehicle that is totally freaking out. I'm surprised he's not going a little bit faster. Alright, so we'll go ahead and zoom the pod on out, and for our next hit, why don't we go ahead and look at the airfield over here. Looking at this airfield, we got some tanks, and looks like we went ahead and masked our pod, so that's alright. We'll go ahead and make a 180-degree turn, come back around, and line up for our next shot. Now, thankfully, with the advanced software that is in the Lightning Targeting Pod, unlike the old Lantern Pod that you see in the F-14, we will have a good memory of where that target was, and when we roll back around, the pod becomes unmasked, the target will just pop up right in front of us and we'll be good to go. Alright. I am enjoying the new lighting system. I think it makes the cockpits look a lot nicer. I know a lot of people are having trouble with cockpit lighting being a little bit too light and a bit too bloomed, but I personally think it looks kind of cool. It makes it look almost more cinematic, if that makes sense. Why don't we go ahead and go after this here tank. And we'll go ahead and get our LMAV set up. 3755, we're good to go there. We'll go to the LMAV scope, and we'll go ahead and uncage that LMAV by going sensor select switch left and going back to the targeting pod. Box trigger. We'll fire that laser. We got a good laze on the target, and rifle. We got our laser latched. And we're keeping an eye on that masking box, make sure we don't mask our pod. I made a mistake there and came off to the left-hand side instead of the right-hand side. So we're kind of recorrecting for that. Now keep in mind that you will outfly your own Mavericks. They tend to fly at a very slow airspeed, and so that can be a little bit of a problem for you. And looks like we just splashed a tank. Perfect. I do know there's some man pads down there, so making sure that we stay out of range of any of those man pads. Maybe pop out a few flares, why not? Better safe than sorry, and flares and expending flares are a heck of a lot cheaper than potentially wrecking your jet. Alright, so it's time to go ahead and set up our GBU-16. Of course, we're retrimming out the jet. I kind of flew it manually without retrimming it out once I released that Maverick, because it really didn't need all that much retrimming, as we now have a pretty darn balanced Hornet at the moment, with a bunch of fuel in that external tank on the right-hand side, and that 1,000-pound class weapon being that GBU-16 on that side. So it's really not too bad and not too poor in its handling characteristics at the moment. Alright, so we're going to have to come out a little bit farther now, because when you switch to a free-falling bomb at the moment in the F-18C after firing an LMAV, it tends to the targeting pod will no longer keep in its memory that point at which you fired that Maverick, which is kind of unfortunate, and I don't know if this is a bug or if it's something that occurs in the software of the real Hornet. I'm inclined to think it's a bit of a bug, but to be honest, it's not that difficult of a bug. We can always use our SA page down here to re-steer our targeting pod back onto our waypoint 2, which is of course that island. And we've also got 2 impact points put on the SA page as well down there to help us reacquire that point. So that's why I'm flying out a little bit further here to allow us a little bit more time to reacquire Greater Tomb Island and acquire a target again. For engaging this next target, I'm going to actually go ahead and attack the helicopters, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. You saw those helicopters lined up on the ramp over there, and we'll go into a little bit of weaponeering here. Now, helicopters are an incredibly soft target, just like any other aircraft on a ramp. And so you really don't need a direct hit on a helicopter in order to actually destroy it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to plop my GBU-16 between 2 helicopters and get a 2 for a kill on those helicopters, because that shrapnel and that blast force exploding, a 1,000-pound bomb exploding between two helicopters, is going to be more than enough to destroy both of those helicopters that are sitting next to that the impact point. And in fact, there's probably going to be enough shrapnel and enough blast force to destroy more than just those two helicopters. Now, this may not actually be represented within DCS World in terms of its splash damage modeling, but it is still something that's kind of cool to practice and keep in mind in terms of flying realistically. Alrighty. So we'll go ahead and flip on barometric altitude hold to help us out at least a little bit here. And there's the island, using that SA page to help us out quite a bit. And we can see those UH-1 helicopters on the ramp here, and we'll go ahead and put our point that we want to hit right between those two helicopters. Like I said, we're looking for maximum damage that we can inflict with our one remaining bomb. And you know what? We'll go ahead and actually put our point right between these two helicopters. So that way we can get maximum damage, splash damage, on the two other helicopters that are outside of those two. Which, when you think about it, with a 1,000-pound weapon exploding next to relatively fragile objects like aircraft, we'll probably get at least a mission kill on all four of these aircraft. Of course, you guys know that the Islamic Republic of Iran Army flies the UH-1. We just double check that we've got the correct laser code. We do. Laser codes match. We're good there. Don't want to F up our nice bombing run here by making a stupid mistake. Alright, we got 40 seconds to release. We've got barometric altitude on, barometric hold on, as well as we've got our auto throttles kicked on, so that way we're decreasing pilot workload as much as possible in order to just make it as easy on ourselves as we possibly can as we fly into our release point. Also gives us time to look around and make sure we're not getting attacked by anything. Keeping an eye and an ear out for our RWR lollipops on our HUD. All this good stuff. And weapon away. 30 seconds to impact. And we'll start firing our laser. And we're going to come off to the right-hand side, doing the correct way to come off of the target. We'll kick off our autopilot just to make it a little easier on ourselves. We'll zoom out the pod. We'll adjust the sweet spot for our impact point that we want. And kaboom, right between those two helicopters. Those two helicopters are donezo in terms of their flying days. They are certainly no longer airworthy, but let's go ahead and take a look and kind of give you guys a visual on what I mean about putting that bomb between those two helicopters. Alright, as we can see here, we can see that even with the not so great damage modeling in terms of splash damage of bombs in DCS World, we've still completely and totally destroyed these two UH-1s. So that's 2 for the price of 1 in terms of kills on those helicopters, which is pretty cool. So guys, make sure you check out my video on actually flying with a double ugly loadout. I go into more depth on it, and it's certainly a welcome addition to the F-18, and I'm sure that people will be very, very excited to fly both the single player and multiplayer servers with these very cool new additions to the DCS World repertoire. Hopefully Eagle Dynamics will get us a nice little fix for the things that have gone wrong in this 2.5.6 update, but you know, it's an open beta. Things are going to happen, things are going to occur, and all we can do is just make the best of it we can. So, thanks a lot guys, and fly safe.